Hey everybody, thanks for joining me again for another video. This one's going to be on the basics of how to play, or maybe what a tabletop role-playing game is and how to engage it, maybe for new players. And some of these thoughts might be helpful for older gamers, people that have been more experienced at it and playing for longer. But it's primarily intended for people that are new at it and want some help sort of entering the arena, so to speak, of tabletop role-playing games. So the first thing I'd like to cover is to say, what is a tabletop role-playing game, or specifically, really, what is tabletop role-playing, and what is that? And I think there's a sort of a spectrum to that. There's definitely a spectrum to that. On one end, you have sort of co-creative storytelling with structure and rules, and on the other end, you have a granular, tactical board game with some story elements, right? And there's everything in between. You know, I'm sort of toward the first end, but I do like tactical combat, and I like the crunch. But myself, I tend to be on the story end. I'm more of I like to weave a story with all of the players' ideas and backstories and style of play they're interested in. And so I'm that kind of dungeon master, and I'm generally that kind of player as well. So with my style, the style I'm more interested in, your roles are sort of like your dungeon master is the MC, or the referee. They are the main writer, perhaps, and they play the roles of all the supporting cast, all the NPCs and such. And the players are sort of the writing team. They're they're the actors, the star actors of the show. They play the lead roles. And yeah, and that sort of interaction is how the gameplay happens, you know, where the GM or dungeon master will set the stage, they'll describe the setting, they'll set the world, they'll decide what races and such are available, give a little bit of history on the world and such like that. They'll also describe the weather and events and things as they change, NPCs' responses to things, and they will act out the NPCs as they move toward their agenda, whatever that is. So yeah, that sort of encapsulates my style of play pretty simply. I mean, there's a lot more to be said on that, and there's definitely going to be a bunch of links in the description for other videos where these things are covered much more in depth by some really, really great channels. So make sure you check that out after you check out my video, and make sure to like and subscribe if you like my content and you like this video. Moving on, so making a character, it can be pretty daunting for a lot of players, and there's a lot of different questions, and there's so many different options, and it's overwhelming. So my advice is, if you're playing a character for the first time, you want to pick something simple. Pick a human, pick an elf, pick something that doesn't have a lot of options. Same thing with your class. Pick a champion fighter, or something like a thief rogue, perhaps. Something where you're gonna have something to sink your teeth into, and you're gonna have to learn some new things, but you're not going to have a list to memorize before your character is useful in the game. So start simple. As far as making a character, there's a couple of different philosophies, you know, and people usually fall somewhere in between, and that is organic and min-maxing. So organic is you make a character, you come up with things that make sense for who they are, what they've been through, and sort of what their personal goals are. With min-maxing, we usually look at the numbers, pick what we want the character to do, and work all of the numbers together, pick the right backgrounds and feats to really make this character really, really good at what we want them to do. A lot of players, like I said, fall somewhere in between. If you find yourself on one end of the spectrum or the other, eventually, it's fine. It's just good to recognize the other gameplay styles at the table, so that when you're making a character, you want to know those things going into it. Something to ask your dungeon master or game master. We have a lot of min-maxers. Is this more organic and story-driven? And, you know, what kind of game is it? Is it more storytelling? Is it more board game? And that'll be really, really helpful. Another set of questions to ask your dungeon master is the theme of the campaign, and sort of, oh yeah, the theme of the campaign in general, because that's going to give you an idea of the type of character you want to make and their story and what they're going to try to go for. You ask the dungeon master what sort of difficulties are going to be in the campaign, what sort of monsters you're going to fight, so you can get an idea of maybe how to approach and start building your character in a way that's going to make them shine, or at least really useful in those situations with those creatures. So Another thing to think about is ask the table what roles are filled. And your basic roles are, you've got a healer, you've got a tank, you've got some damage, and you've got support. And so tank is taking attention, taking damage, right? Healer is staying alive and keeping others alive. The damage is staying alive and killing the enemy. And support is changing the battlefield, giving buffs and boons to party members, throwing challenges and traps and status effects and things like that on the enemy. So those are your basic roles. So you want to find out what roles have been filled, and maybe try to make a character that fills that niche. And you don't have to go all in. Just keep that in mind. What the what the party needs, because that's going to give you an opportunity to really shine, as well as be a really good sign of being a team player, right? That being said, you don't have to go too far. If they need a healer, just make a class that can heal. Perhaps you don't have to make the perfect, by the numbers healer class. Just make somebody who's pretty good at it, and then make the character you want on with that. Or make the character you want who can also heal, or who's also utility, or who's also damage, or who's also tank. And a lot of times your dungeon master is willing to throw an NPC in there who can fill a role that's missing. So you're not always stuck with that, but it is a good place to start when you're asking questions and trying to get an idea of what you want to build out of all the options out there. So there's a few things to really think about when you're making a character and you're thinking about their personality. One thing is, are they an evil person? Are they have evil alignment? Is the person a sort of a jerk or antisocial? Or are they just a lone wolf? Do they want to do everything alone? Are they geared to do everything alone? And none of these character ideas are problematic on their own. It's how far we take our thinking. If we just want to play this character, we want to get really into this style of play, then we might be leaving out a few key things. And the main one is just player enjoyment. That's the overall umbrella we want to remember. Other players' enjoyment. So if we're going to make an evil character who's cutthroat and is willing to kill other party members to get what they want, if we're trying to make a character who's antisocial and is just a jerk to everybody, or we're trying to make a character who's just a lone wolf and has to go it alone, and nobody believes them or nobody trusts them, then it's really important to find a way to play that so that the rest of the party can enjoy it. You don't want to limit their character options, their choices, and their interaction in role-playing options by the way you make yours. And you don't want to come across as a real-life jerk. And there's a fine line there. It's really hard to find sometimes. And so a good place to start is talking to your party and your GM, everybody at the table of session 0, and say, hey, I really want to play a jerk. Here's what I'm thinking. What do y'all think? And get some feedback, and you should be able to dial it in. And most of the time I've found that the table is going to be okay with it as long as they have some say in how you're impacting their characters and the overall story. So yeah, antisocial, lone wolf, evil characters, just not bad, just something to think about, Another thing I want to talk about with characters and building them is as mechanics as distinct from the fiction of the character. So a lot of times we look in the player's handbook, and the races, the classes, the backgrounds, they have some mechanics, and they have fiction with them. Now, as a player, you often have the option to do away with that fiction entirely and just use the mechanics and use fiction from the campaign that the GM sets out for you, or if the GM's open and they allow you free reign, then you can just fill that fiction in with whatever you want and just use the mechanics. And that can be a really fun way to build your character in a way that's not limiting. You want to use magic, but you don't want a character who's you want to be a wizard. You want books and scrolls, but you don't want a character who is bookish. You don't want a person in robes with a staff. You want an adventurer and a gambler who just happens to have been put into wizard school by their noble parents. Well, you can definitely do that. You just look at the mechanics of what they can do, and you eschew everything else. Maybe they didn't study very well, and they haven't memorized all these different things. And when they sit down to prepare their spells, they're just sort of looking over stuff and remembering, and really it's more of a matter of will. It's all this will, and they've been around magical things, and they don't really understand it. You know, they just sort of fake it because they just didn't make it through school. They didn't care. But it is a magical world, and so just by their force of will and wanting to belong and save face, they are able to summon magic. You know, another one is a thief or a rogue who's you know, a very good person, and they've just found themselves in a series of situations and made desperate actions, and that's reflected in their sort of skills. They've just over and over again had to do these desperate things. They've had to hide and ambush people. They've had to run and escape and climb out of dangerous positions. They've had to break locks to get into things. It's not because they want to do illicit things. It's a life of desperation has led them there. And so they may be trying to be a wizard. They may be trying to be a noble, or become a man-at-arms to some other noble. But they have this other skill set entirely. So I like the idea of, and it's really can be useful and playful to separate the mechanics from the fiction of the character classes and races and stuff like that. And talk to your GM about that. And that might open up a lot of creativity for making a character. So yeah, moving on. Your PC, your background for your player character when you choose a new background. Now, obviously you want to check with your Dungeon Master to see what's limited. At the same time, you want to talk to them about different options other than what's on the list of backgrounds out of the source books. Because there might be some other option. They might have some different things. They might be able to, you know, allow you some of the optional rules for background or homebrew one yourself or whatever. So it's really fun. It can be really helpful to pick a really good background for your character that really makes sense in the setting. And the reason is because the GM can do a lot with that. It just is a little dangling story thread that the Dungeon Master can later weave into something. And it might, might surprise you, but it's gonna, and might be really fun. So that's just a really useful thing too, and it can help you start to see the character you're making as a person in another world. So I think right now it's time for a tea break, so bear with me. Maybe I should put a little like music here, some old music or Jeopardy. Yeah, that's good. All right, what do we got next? Mechanics. There's a lot of aspects of the mechanics. It's actually pretty simple once you just go through the rules in the player's handbook on how to make your character, how to put their ability scores into place, how to choose, choose the right ability scores for the type of class and the type of play that you want. There's a lot of other channels. How did I lose that word? There's a lot of other channels that have done some really great videos on that. So I'm going to link a couple again in the description. So I'm not really going to talk too much about mechanics. I sort of lean away from them. I like themes and ideals. So I'll min-max my character around a theme more than I will around a certain combat style or type of play, if that makes sense. So yeah, I'm sort of an odd player, and that may be why I GM much more than I play. All right, moving on, I want to talk about role-playing. And I think there's a couple of misnomers about role-playing. Because you hear players say, I'm not very good at role-playing. I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to talk in character and all that. And really what they're saying is I don't know how to act. I'm not comfortable with acting. And that's what most people mean when they say role-playing. They mean acting. It means saying it in character and improvisation. And not everybody's good at that. That's not always fun. But role-playing really is just anything that you're doing when you're dealing with your character. If you're thinking through situations they're in, if you're trying to imagine what they would do, if you're describing what they do, or if you're improv and speaking in as that person. These are all aspects of role-playing. And so there shouldn't be we don't need to feel any pressure to act. If we want to role-play, just do what's comfortable. And maybe stretch our comfort zone and try new things a little bit at a time until we maybe find ourselves in a situation where we're really comfortable speaking in character, even debating other players in character. And that can be really fun, but it can be just as fun to sit back and think about everything and imagine it in your head and just describe what your character does. That can be just as satisfying, and there's really not any rules. So yeah, I think that's an important misnomer that I want to speak on, is that we usually mean acting when we say role-playing. So, or at least a lot of times, not usually, but often, yeah. So another aspect to talk about is as you're role-playing, especially when you're new at it, you're going to learn as you go. You're going to make a character and you're not going to be sure how to role-play them or what their personality's like or anything. And you might start out speaking in a French accent and later decide, no, you want it to be more sort of German or Russian, you know? And, you know, you may even start out thinking you want to be a fire sorcerer. And then as you sort of play through the game, you decide that's not really the vibe you're going for, or maybe you don't like the mechanics, but either way, you don't want to roleplay that. And you might talk to your GM about changing. And sometimes there's a story reason. Sometimes GMs will just let you choose. That's fine, you can change it. It's no big deal. I'll make up an excuse. So learning as you play, you know, is what we're doing. We're all sort of getting better at whatever we do, the more we do it. So don't worry about having to nail your character down and have everything locked in place and know exactly how they would act and react in a situation. It's totally fine to just say, I feel like my character has a really strong reaction to that. Let me get back to you, you know, and give me a minute, or move on to somebody else and come back to me, because you want to get it right. So you don't want to pressure yourself to do it now, right? Yeah. So learn as you go. Yeah. Let's see. Alignment. I'm not going to talk very much about alignment. Different people use it different ways. A lot of people don't really use it much anymore at all. I ask players to choose it, but I don't often use it. I like it as an option to play with. And I've talked a little bit about alignment in other videos. And I think it's a kind of fun mechanic. I think it's it brings you into the realm of sort of archetypical thinking. I don't think it maps very well to the real physical world. I think alignment, good and evil, more maps to like things in our psyche, our experience, the light and darkness within us, sort of. So as far as role-playing different alignments, you know, there's a lot of different takes on different stuff. I don't think that lawful good is stupid. I don't think it's super law-abiding. I don't think lawful good has to mean that they are patriotic or zealous about their religion. I think lawful means you generally believe in law. I mean, Matt Coleville, he had a great video on alignment, and I might try to find that and link that in the description as well. Although I think I've already got a Coleville video linked down there. But yeah, I think lawful good people are people who generally don't want to hurt other people, and they generally agree that the law is useful. And I think chaotic evil people are opposite. They're people that they don't care about the law at all, and they think it's stupid, although they'll manipulate people's belief in the law to get what they want. And evil, generally, that they don't care if they hurt people or not. It doesn't matter to them. They may not be particularly interested in hurting people, but they're also very much don't care about preserving anybody else's life but their own, or perhaps someone they really care about. So yeah, role-playing alignment can be tricky. Again, I think it kind of refers to making antisocial characters and how you want to role-play that. And again, talking to the table, talking to your GM, and really putting some thought into what you think evil is like in the world and how you want to portray that or explore that. Because I think that's really what we're doing. We're not portraying people, we're not portraying personalities, we are exploring the concepts of personalities and character as we roleplay, you know, so exploration. Races, role-playing races. Here's where I'm a little tricky and I'm different than some people. There's a lot of times, you know, your elves will get a very fine, soft British accent, and your dwarves will get a Scottish accent. I try to stay away from, it can be really difficult, but I try to stay away from real world accents in my D&D worlds. I try to stretch it or alter it or reshape it just enough to where you can't place it. Because I feel like that takes people out of this world and puts them in this imaginary world that we're all hallucinating together in our minds, It's something that harkens from another world, so it shouldn't sound familiar. So that's what I go for when it comes to playing races and stuff like that. I think playing your race as using an accent or cultural trappings from the real world, I think it can be fine. I think it can be problematic. It depends on if you're respectful or not of those cultures and such. And I think really just knowledge is going to help everything. The more you know about the culture that you're trying to draw from, I think automatically the more sort of respectful you're going to be. And the less you look into it, the more you run the risk of being disrespectful and taking aspects of a culture that are really, really sacred or really important and like kind of crapping on them, And so just knowledge I think is going to help there in terms of if you want to map real world societies onto a race. So excuse me. I already talked a little bit about playing a jerk or an antisocial character. And again, I think it's fine, but I think it's best to try to find a way to play that character in a way that everybody likes. So make a deal with everybody at the beginning of the session. Be like, okay, cool. I want to try and steal this from everybody. But I'm going to turn around and buy stuff for everybody, whenever we shop. So I just actually want it to be like, can I just be the treasurer as the thief? But the way I get the money is by swindling and doing all that. And you can kind of set up this way for the other characters to role play with your antisocial, jerk, greedy, thief person, So just ideas like that, I could probably kick around a few more, but I'm sure you get the idea. So just work it out, Let's see here. If you like this video, maybe hit the notification buttons, the little bell thingy, and it'll notify you and give you a little red dot in the corner of your screen over here. Man, I haven't figured that out yet. It's not my left and my rights. Whether YouTube shifts it around and then never mind. Let's see. Character development is something I wanted to talk about. Let's see here. So, developing your character. And this, we're going to talk about mechanics a little bit. Mostly we're going to talk about personality and stuff. But so developing your character mechanically, you level up and stuff like that. And you gain new abilities and you gain new feats. You pick new ability scores and class options and subclasses and such. I want to talk about character experience versus optimization versus experimentation, right? So in the one camp, you've got, what did my character go through? What did they do? And I'm going to choose things that reflect what they've been doing because that makes sense. That's how I feel like my character would grow, right? The next one is optimization. I'm going to pick whatever's best for my character for what the player knows we're going to go through. Okay, cool. And then experimentation. I want to try this. I've never tried this before. I really want to try this feat. I know I'm a gnome and I'm not really a fighter, but I'm pretty physical for a sorcerer, and I think this is going to be useful, so I want to try it out, right? So those are all useful and all completely acceptable ways to level up your character. But they're just talking about it like that can kind of help you frame it and like, okay, there's different ways to approach building my character. And for the most part, you're probably going to use a combination. I think a lot of people probably do. A trickier one is personality and character growth. If you're interested in this sort of thing, if you like deep game, you want to make a character arc. I've actually included another video from, I think, Professor Dungeon Master in the description that talks a little bit about developing an arc. And he says it best, but ultimately he talks about a few things, and one of them is talking to your party and your GM about it and seeing what that would look like within the game if everybody else is interested in that and such like that. So my advice for that, or my thoughts on that, is I'm gonna, probably watch that video a few more times actually. But I suggest you check that video out and give them a like and a comment and see what you think. I talked a little bit earlier about learning as you go and rethinking your character. Now I think, again, we have this, sometimes we'll feel pressure to figure everything out and lock everything down first thing. But we should give ourselves the chance to try new things, experiment, mess up, and if that means changing or rethinking our character's backstory or class choices, again, talk to your dungeon master, talk to your players, and see what everybody thinks, And more than likely, everyone's going to want to come up with some sort of fiction that explains why this change happened. And that can be really fun. I feel like that's a really fun part of the role-playing experience, is how we explain, because we're trying to weave a story, we're trying to make a coherent narrative out of it, for the most part, for deep gamers and stuff like that. Yeah. Might be time for another tea break. Let me collect my thoughts here. So I want to talk a little bit about just playing the role in general. D&D is cooperative. And I have talked a little bit earlier about playing a problematic or lone wolf or jerk character, antisocial. And it's important to remember it's a cooperative game. So if you're going to make those characters, like I said, talk to your DM, talk to everybody, find a way to do it that's fun. And it might be tricky, but everything worthwhile takes some work. So, you don't just get it for free. If I want to do this really cool thing, I want to have this really awesome character, and I want to have all the other characters hate them, but all the players love them. That's the way to do it. And that's hard, but it's fun. So I think if that's the kind of player you want, or character you want, that's sort of the best way to go about it. Otherwise, I think you're softballing it in there, you're softening it, and it's just words on a page saying that your character's a lone wolf, but they're really, or a thief, or a jerk, or whatever. But they're really just a normal person, and they're playing along like everything else. But if you talk to your party and stuff about it, you can develop something more fun. So let's see here. So I talked about theme earlier, like the wounded hero, the redeemed villain, the triumphant, weakling, I guess, the person who thinks they're weak and they're kicked and they're beaten down and they stay a good person, but they finally succeed at this certain thing and they gain the respect of the people around them. These are all themes, right? So again, that's sort of like any deep stuff, character themes, ideas that you have, you definitely want to talk to your GM and the other players about them, unless you want to surprise the other players, but that can be tricky. It's best to surprise the characters, not the players. Arm the players with knowledge, surprise the characters. That's how I think it works best. That way, it doesn't get in the way of other people's game. Yeah, let's see here. Player knowledge versus character knowledge, which also known as metagaming, right? The thoughts about metagaming. So, right, certain things about the game, about what's going to happen, what to expect. There's going to be goblins ahead because you found out something from the GM, or you saw some notes, or they told you. So certain things that your character does not know. They are a person in this world. So you're limited on how you can act on the things that you know. And you try to think about, okay, does my character know this? Okay, my character doesn't know this, but I don't want to do this stupid thing, so how do I avoid it? That kind of thing. So, and the other aspect of this is the PC knowledge. PCs know things that the players do not know. They can do things that the players cannot do. And they'll make decisions that the players will not make. So, thinking about that as we go forward, as we build our character, as we play them, and as we're thrown in situations with them, can be really, 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 really helpful to help you navigate that line of metagaming. Because I think there is some necessary metagaming. It's really hard to get anything done if you can't act on any of your knowledge for the character. It makes it really, really hard. For instance, I think coming to the table and looking at the gameplay as cooperative. When we build a character, we're playing them a certain way that reflects that. That's metagaming. We're bending a character, making a character toward this end, right? So there's sort of no way to avoid metagaming, and there's a necessary level. What we call metagaming, or what we deride as metagaming is using the knowledge that you know that your character definitely has no way of knowing to your advantage. to make it easier to circumvent challenges, to cut out the risk of death and injury and cost for victory, you know? Yeah, stealing, I mean, it steals the fun out of it, really, for most people at the table if you're just handed a victory. And unnecessary or cheatery type metagaming kind of does that. It's like, it takes the wind out of it for everybody. I feel like, you know, it can disappoint the players because they kind of know what's going on, and it definitely can disappoint the GM because they did a lot of work or whatever. So, but there is, you know, a level of necessary metagaming just when it comes to the group intent. You know, we're metagaming because we're trying to serve the table's intent through our characters, which involves a little bit of metagaming. So I think it's fine. We just keep it at a level that doesn't irritate the players and the GM. And that's different a little bit to each table, so talk to everybody. Let's see here. No. So yeah, leveling up, where you can choose to gain a new level in your class, perhaps choose a new subclass. You can also choose to level up in a different class. And the problem here is you don't get the maximum level abilities if you're going to level 20 for your previous class, but you gain now new benefits from this other class. And it opens up new styles of gameplay and new sort of character dynamics and character aspects. So, you know, there's a cost, but there's a reward for it too. So on both, they both tend to be pretty fun. I like multi-classing. I usually won't multi-class until like 8th, 9th level, but then I'll usually multi-class a little bit because it just starts getting really exciting to dip a level here, dip a level there into something else. So, I don't know. Okay. On dying. So, character death is tricky. Some people don't care. Some people love it. Some people dislike it. Some people are deeply bothered by it. And I think to some degree, you know, it can be how seriously we take the game. I think it can be how we look at death or how much we've processed mortality and stuff like that. It does touch upon some real serious feelings that we have in life. And so I think if your character does die and you do have some serious feelings about it, have those feelings. Don't judge yourself. Something that you cared about doesn't exist anymore. You know, even if it didn't really exist in the real world, you were having an experience that you can't really have anymore. You know, this character was destroyed in this world. You have to make a new one now. So it's loss. You know, minor though it might be to some people, it might be really huge to others. It might echo other losses. You know, so I think it's important if we lose a character and we do have serious feels about it, give space. Don't judge ourselves. You know, think about it. Let it kick some processing off. It's it can be scary, but it can be really healthy to think about those things, especially with a group of our friends. You know, we talk to them about it at the table. If we're having problems with it, the death of our character, it's bringing up certain feelings. Talk to the GM and the players about it. I think we might be surprised that how what's the word for it? Receptive to those conversations our friends are. You know, maybe not, but I think for the most part, I've been pleasantly surprised when I bring up subjects like that with people and their responses. Yeah. So, yeah. Another one is to trust the game, trust the dungeon master. It's a magical world. Your character may not be dead, but it's important for story and for experience to be like, I've lost this character. I've got to make a new one. You know, and then maybe something happens, maybe whatever. Maybe just a few minutes of thinking your character's dead. The GM's probably going to let it happen for a second, unless they're a real softy, which I've definitely been in the past of like, oh, don't worry, we're going to do this, you know, the second the character dies. Some GMs are going to let it play out for a minute, maybe a few games. Maybe you'll play an NPC. They might take it so far as to have you roll up a new character. My point is trust your dungeon master. And if you're having problems trusting your dungeon master and your table, there might be some other underlying issue going on that's preventing that trust. So that might be something else to look into. You know, when our character dies, we have to make a new one. We have to make a new character. Maybe we were really attached. Maybe we played that one to really high levels. Maybe it had certain items or set of abilities we really liked. But now we have to make a new one. And we want to step into that same role. We want to do some of the same things, but we want to be different. So I think it can be really fun if you have some sort of group legends about your character within that group. And then you go and make a new character, and you bring him in, and then that character gets to hear about them. And then, gets to be like, well, it sounds like they were very capable, and it sounds like they'll be missed, and I'll do my best to fill their, I know it's impossible to fill their shoes, but I'll do my best to fill their role, and perhaps in time you'll come to trust me as well, or some such thing. But it could be a really good way to honor that character, and that can sort of help. And that's part of what we're doing. We're telling stories, we're having these experiences. It's partially a roller coaster, even if you're just playing a more board game style. There's still some feelings there. There's still some, and that's why we play this game. Or we wouldn't if it didn't do something. We're emotionally driven creatures, whether we want to admit it or not. So yeah. And I think that could be a way of keeping the dead alive, so to speak. The character dies and there's still stories told about them, and the new character that you're playing sort of honors them and stuff like that. That could be really, really cool. So yeah. See, the next subject I think I want to talk about is ways of playing. And online is one, and it's very popular with everything that's been happening in the world. It's increasingly popular. That's how I play and run games now, and I think it's really great. There's also, of course, your traditional sitting around a table, which is traditional for a reason, and it's wonderful, and I love it. So online games, you've got a few different features that make it different. It's kind of easier to schedule. Nobody has to be able to drive all the way to somebody else's house. People can be really comfortable. They can just be in front of their computer, maybe not even using cam. They can be sweatshirt, t-shirt, Cheeto crumbs all over them. It doesn't matter. They can just come as they are. All they have to do is have a headset and a mic, their character sheet, and a good attitude. So with some of the tools on virtual tabletops, online play is really amazing, and it's really, really fun. I resisted it for a long time, until about 6 months ago, actually. And then once I got into it, there's no looking back. I will play in person, but most of the friends that I played with moved away, passed away. Different people grow apart and things like that. So there's only a few people I would play with, and we're all busy and our schedules are very different. So we're able to play together online, and of course I have several campaigns I'm running online as well, and they're great. There can be a lot of problems depending on whether it's paid or free. And either way, if it's paid, that's a problem for some people. If it's free, you'll get a lot of people that aren't invested and aren't really respectful of your time. And a lot of, I don't want to say kids, but people who are just very flippant and they just want to joke and make joke characters, and they just want to meme the whole time, and they're not really interested in playing the game. They just want to hang out. And so I found with paid games, that changes the dynamic. When I put together a table of people who are paying to be there, there's an automatic buy-in. They're not going to play in a world they're not interested in and pay for it. So if they join a game, they're interested in the backstory, they ask a bunch of questions, they make characters that fit, and they try to follow the story that I've prepared. Not a story, but they try to uncover the mysteries that I've buried for them, and fight the creatures that are trying to do them dirty. There's also a lot more cooperation and a lot more, just more mature attitudes, I want to say, in terms of people who are willing to pay for the time, willing to put that symbol of value up. Hey, I value this. And so there's a lot of buy-in. There's a lot less drama, and there's a lot more cooperation. And more people who are proficient in the game, or at least very willing to learn. That's what I found for paid games online. When I did free games online, it was about 50-50, to be honest. I had a lot of players who were very serious and they were really interested in the scenario and the story, really interested in the world, the action. And then about half the people, they just wanted to mess around, wanted to kind of tell their own story, and let's go off over here instead and do this, and all of the problem player behavior. And once I joined paid games and started running them, all of those problems are gone. You still have some scheduling issues occasionally, but for the most part, I think I can count on one hand the times my paid games have had to postpone. So, very consistent, very respectful, very invested players on the paid side. I'm sure with more experience running free games, I could, and with the experience I've gotten now, I could probably go back and set certain filters in place to keep problematic playing styles out of the game or whatever. But so far my experience has been, I've had a lot more fun with paid games than I have with free games. Now playing at a table is totally different. You can use actual terrain. You can see each other's faces as people are acting out their characters and responding to each other. The GM can emote a lot better. Everyone can see them as they act different characters. A lot of physical stuff can be done. It's a lot easier to share music. Or, the GM can play music and everyone can hear it. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to be said for just physically gathering and just being in each other's presence and having a table full of snacks and taking a break during the session, and half the people go outside to have a cigarette and the other half of people go in the kitchen and have some coffee, and then everyone gets back together and they're all talking about the game and doing stuff, and then the two groups get back together and the table comes back together. It's amazing. It's wonderful. And the bonding that we do in person, I think, is much stronger because that's just our nature. The internet's pretty new. We've only had 20 years, if not even, to adapt to it at the level that it's at. So yeah, tables are amazing. I think a lot of tools are evolving for online play though, and I'm really excited about some of them. Tailspire I've gotten recently, and I've been slowly learning more about it, and it looks really, really good. I'm really excited to be proficient with it so I can start trying to run some games in it. And with, mic and camera and headphones and stuff, playing online could be decently personal and personable. It's easy for it to be kind of anonymous though, and I think that's something you have to work against a little bit when you are playing online, especially without a camera. So yeah, those are some of my thoughts on online table play, free, paid play. Yeah, I had a couple more things that I wanted to mention, but they didn't really seem, once I was looking at my list, once I started recording, it didn't seem important. So yeah, if you have any thoughts on anything that I've said, you have any corrections, you have your advice, your tips that you would want to share, please put them in the comments. If you think there's anything I missed or something I left out that was really important, please leave that in the comments as well. Yeah, I really thank you for showing and watching my video. Like I said, if you like it, subscribe, perhaps share it with somebody, hit the bell icon, whatever. And if you have any suggestions in the future for any other videos or any other content, please just hit me up in the messages, the comments, guys, or you can find me on Discord or any of my other platforms, and you can find that, here on my channel, whichever one of these buttons, depending on what platform or which way they work things. Yeah, I will see y'all soon. I'll see y'all next week with another video. Not sure what it's gonna be about. It might be basics of running a game, but I think I did one on that sort of already. So yeah, this may be more about some nuanced, specific aspects of running a game, like home brewing or world building, how to sell the world building and not make it boring and be a bunch of info dumps. So yeah, if you like that idea, go ahead and like the video or hit something out in the comments about the world building thing or whatever. And I hope y'all had a good week. I hope you have a good week ahead. And yeah, let me know how you're doing. Take care. See you next week.